Hey guys, Greg here.
Hey guys, first day of snow. I'm a couple hours from Labrador, probably even less than that actually. I'm basically right on the border. And I'm on one of the most remote roads in Canada. Perfect time for snow, hey? Well, this ought to be fun.
So yes, this week I drove the Trans Labrador Highway. For those of you who don't know, the Trans Labrador Highway is the only highway in Labrador and one of the more remote roads in Canada. You know, it's supposed to be one of the great Canadian road trips, especially for Eastern Canada. So, a little overview of the road. It's composed of 3 routes. Route 389 begins in Baie-Comeau in Quebec and goes 267 kilometers until the Labrador border. The highway then becomes Route 500, and that goes 543 kilometers until Happy Valley Goose Bay, which is the largest town in Labrador at 8,000 people. There's a stretch of road that connects Happy Valley to Northwest River. This is Route 520. Continuing past Happy Valley Goose Bay, the highway becomes Route 510 for 606 kilometers until the Quebec border. The highway is extremely remote, some sections more than others. It's about half gravel and half paved. I drove the road in its entirety in 4 days. So, let's jump into this. Morning of day 1, I was awoken by humpback whales on the coast of Baie-Comeau. I gassed up and got on Route 389 going north. For the first little while, the road was paved and there was a decent amount of cars on the road, so it didn't really feel very remote. That changed pretty quickly. About 3 hours in, I crossed over this dam and the road turned to gravel, and then for the next little while, I felt like the only one on the road. Eventually, it turned back into pavement, but still not a lot of people. And then later that day, back to gravel. And this was my favorite part of day 1. It was getting a little darker and the road just got super windy. It felt very remote here, surprisingly, because I was coming close to Fermont, which is the first major town on the road. Anyways, it was a really fun hour or so before reaching Fermont, and I decided to stop there for the day after about 6 hours of driving. You don't want to do too much night driving on this highway. Firstly, because it's dangerous, there's a lot of accidents involving moose on the highway. But more than that, you just don't really want to miss any of it. It's an incredibly scenic drive. Daylight is kind of a must. So I camped on a beach they have in Fermont, and it snowed that night, so I woke up to quite the surprise. The funny story here is that I took a bath in this lake the night before this happened, and then the next morning there was ice forming on the lake. Needless to say, that bath was a terrible idea, and it had me seriously concerned about frostbite on my feet. Don't worry, I'm fine. Day 2, I was a little worried just because I don't have snow tires. I was slipping and sliding quite a bit when I was on my way out of Fermont, so I decided to test the waters on the highway just by driving to Labrador City, which is only like 23 kilometers away. But once I got on the highway, the roads were fine, and I dealt with snow on and off for the rest of the journey. Of course, the snow made day 2 breathtaking. The first couple hours, everything was coated with snow. And then it started to subside a bit by the time I reached Churchill Falls. Perfect timing, because I did a hike to see the falls. It was still super cold and I got soaked, but it was totally worth it. I hiked all along this cliff and down the canyon. Quite the climb back up. Beautiful sights. Afterwards, I drove to the town of Churchill Falls. Not a whole lot to do there, but that's expected for a town of 700 people. So the hike took a decent chunk out of my day. I saw a beautiful sunset in my rearview mirror, and then I found a field to camp in a few hours from Churchill Falls.
Okay, just woke up, morning of day 3 on the Trans Labrador. More snow, but not quite as much as there was yesterday morning. But holy shit, it is quite a bit colder.
Day 3 was amazing. Near Happy Valley, the forest becomes more deciduous. The colors were beautiful. I made it to Happy Valley and then I drove Route 520 up to Northwest River. All the towns here are great. Everyone's so nice, everyone waves. In Happy Valley, I was just driving along, I must have waved at like 100 people. It's about a half-hour drive up to Northwest River and a half-hour back. I did a little hike there called the Tranquility Trail, and I drove to the top of Sunday Hill, which is known for its nice view. I was gonna have a picnic there, but the wind got to me. Unfortunately, the Labrador Interpretation Center is closed for the season. It's supposed to be an interesting visit. Leaving Happy Valley, there is a 410-kilometer stretch of gravel with no services at all. No gas stations, no towns, no nothing until Port Hope Simpson. This stretch is the most remote part of the road.
One of my favorite things about driving roads like this, you stop to take a picture, and then, you know, you're just out in the middle of the road, and there's no one in either direction. And there won't be. It's great. It's just a very freeing feeling.
It was here that I finally saw a moose. Actually, 3 moose.
Holy shit!
And this is all the wildlife I saw the entire time, except for a couple porcupines on day 1. I slept at a rest stop that night and then began my final day on the highway.
Just woke up. Morning of day 4 on the Trans Labrador. It's like the less snow there is out here, the colder it gets. It didn't snow last night,
Day 4 had a little bit of everything. A little bit of forest, then the landscape opens up with caribou moss. In some ways it reminded me of the Arctic tundra. I did a little walk to a waterfall in Mary's Harbor, and a few hours later I had my first glimpse of the ocean. The coastal drive was incredible. I stopped at Red Bay and walked up this enormous set of stairs to the highest hill overlooking the bay. Beautiful. I also stopped at Pointe-Amour Lighthouse, which is the tallest lighthouse in Atlantic Canada. And shortly after that, I reached the end of Labrador and once again entered Quebec.
Okay, just finished the Trans Labrador Highway. It was absolutely unreal. I did it in 4 days, and it's one of the most beautiful roads I've ever been on. So I'm in Quebec now, just crossed over the border again. I'm on the ferry tomorrow to get to Newfoundland. And yeah, just witnessing a beautiful oceanside sunset right now. And I'm camping right next to the beach tonight. And yeah, it's just been a hell of a 4 days. Absolutely amazing.
So now for some final thoughts on the journey. Some newfies have since asked me how the drive was. I gotta say, it was incredibly fun. It feels like the most remote road I've driven since the Northern Territories. One thing that amazed me were the road conditions. It was in great shape. The paved stretches felt like they were paved the day before, and even the gravel areas were either very well packed or very well graded. Was it dangerous? No, not at all. I mean, I guess I'm comparing it to the Dalton Highway because that's the only other road that I've driven that's known for being really, really remote, and anything compared to the Dalton feels like a cakewalk. But even the Liard Trail was a rougher road than this. Even James Bay Road was rougher than this. James Bay was paved the whole way, but it was a lot shittier pavement than the Trans Labrador. One funny thing about Route 500 is they have mileposts every 10 kilometers. So 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers, 50, etc. Except for kilometer 420. They do 419 instead.
Stuff will mess with your mind, man.
Anyway, the trip through Labrador was a ton of fun. And since it doesn't really feel like a dangerous expedition, at least not in the summertime, it's a road trip I would recommend to almost anyone. So, having completed the trip, I took the ferry from Quebec to Newfoundland the next day.
First glimpse of Newfoundland. I arrived.
I drove the Viking Trail down to Grossmoor National Park, beautiful drive, and hiked up Grossmoor Mountain. This was a pretty strenuous hike, 16 kilometers total, 8 kilometers of that being on the mountain, but it made for some incredible views. And there were actually a couple of people at the top who were doing the hike also, so I managed to get a picture of myself at the summit. They were in full winter gear and looked at me like I was nuts. I didn't know the top of the mountain would be so damn cold. So this week ends in Grossmoor National Park. Next, I head east. So thanks again for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and as always, I will see you same time, different place next week.